People said Caleb Rourke was crazy the night he married a stranger in a blizzard. She had no money, no family, nowhere to go, just desperation written across her face and frost on her coat. He had nothing to offer but miles of snow, a failing ranch, and silence that could break a person. The whole saloon laughed when he asked her. She said yes anyway. What happened next wasn't a fairy tale. It was brutal, messy, and real. Two people betting everything on a gamble that shouldn't have worked. But here's the thing, it did. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The storm hit Red Hollow 3 days before Christmas, and it hit mean. Snow came down in waves thick enough to lose a man at 10 paces. Wind tore through the valley like something angry, ripping shingles off roofs and turning wagon wheels into ice sculptures. The kind of weather that made people stupid or desperate. Iris Vale was both. She stood outside the Rosewood Saloon for a full minute before she pushed the door open, feeling the wind shove at her back like it wanted her gone. Inside was warmth, noise, the stink of whiskey and wet wool. She stepped through and every head turned. Not because she was beautiful, though under different circumstances she might have been. Dark hair plastered to her cheeks. Coat torn at the shoulder. Boots that didn't fit right, wrapped with twine to hold the soles on. Eyes too wide, scanning the room like a cornered animal. Someone laughed. Lost, sweetheart? A man at the bar, heavy set with a red face and a smirk that didn't reach his eyes. Iris didn't answer. She moved toward the fire, her legs shaking. Not from cold, though that was part of it. From the kind of exhaustion that came from walking too far with nothing in your stomach and no place left to go. The bartender, a graying man named Dutch, set down the glass he was polishing. You got money? No. Then you can't stay. I'm not asking to stay, her voice cracked. She cleared her throat, tried again. I'm asking for work. That got more laughs. A woman's voice from the corner, sharp and mocking. What kind of work you think we got here, honey? Iris's jaw tightened. Any kind. Cleaning, cooking, I don't care. I can work. Sure you can, the red-faced man grinned. Question is, what are you willing to do for it? More laughter. Louder this time. Iris felt her face burn, but she didn't look away. She'd heard worse, done worse, if she was honest. Desperation had a way of rewriting the rules. I'm not looking for that, she said quietly. Just honest work. Honest. Dutch snorted. Girl, look at yourself. You walk in here like a drowned cat. No money, no references, asking for charity. I'm not asking for charity. I said I'd work. Nobody's hiring. Somebody might be. They're not. The conversation was dying. Iris could feel it slipping away, the room already turning back to cards and drinks and forgetting she existed. She took a step forward, her voice louder now, desperate. I can cook, I can sew, I can clean, You can leave. Dutch's tone was final. Storm or no storm, I'm not running a charity house. Iris stood there frozen. Not from the cold anymore. From the realization that she had nothing left to say, no angle left to play. She'd walked 15 miles through a blizzard because someone in the last town said Red Hollow might have work. They were wrong. She turned toward the door. Wait! The voice came from the back corner. Low, rough, like it didn't get used much. The kind of voice that made people stop. Iris looked. A man sat alone at a table near the far wall, half in shadow. Broad-shouldered, maybe 40, with a face that looked like it had taken a few too many hits and forgotten how to smile. Dark beard, longer than it should be. Eyes that didn't blink much. Caleb Rourke. She didn't know his name yet. Didn't know that half the town thought he was cursed, that his wife had died in childbirth 2 years back and taken something vital with her. Didn't know he lived 20 miles out on a ranch people said was haunted by grief. All she saw was a man who hadn't laughed. You serious about the work? Caleb asked. Iris nodded. Yes. What happened to the last place you were? It burned. Your fault? No. Why'd you leave? Because there was nothing left. Caleb studied her. Not the way the other men had. Not sizing her up like livestock. Just looking. Measuring something she couldn't name. You got family? No. Debts? No. Anyone coming after you? Iris hesitated. No. Caleb leaned back in his chair. You're lying. She didn't deny it. But you're not lying about the work, he added. That part's true. It is. He was quiet for a long time, long enough that Iris thought maybe he'd changed his mind. Then he stood, pulling on a heavy coat that looked older than she was. Come on. Where? My place. You want work? I got it. Dutch made a noise from behind the bar. Caleb, you sure about this? No. Caleb didn't look back. But I'm doing it anyway. Iris followed him to the door, her heart pounding. She didn't know what she was walking into. Didn't know if this was salvation or something worse. But it was movement. It was a chance. And chances were all she had left. The cold hit her like a fist. Caleb moved through the snow without looking back, his stride long and steady. Iris stumbled after him, fighting to keep up. Her boots kept slipping. Her lungs burned. Where's your horse? She managed. Stable. How far? Not far. It felt far. By the time they reached the stable, Iris's legs were shaking again. Caleb pushed the door open and gestured her inside. The warmth was immediate. Animal heat. Hay. The smell of leather and manure. 2 horses stood in stalls near the back. One was a big chestnut gelding, scarred along the shoulder. The other was smaller, a gray mare with intelligent eyes. Caleb saddled the gelding without speaking, his movements efficient and practiced. Iris watched, trying to catch her breath. You know how to ride? He asked. A little. Good enough. He led the gelding out, mounted in one smooth motion, then extended a hand down to her. Iris stared at it. You coming or not? She took his hand. His grip was solid, calloused, and he pulled her up behind him like she weighed nothing. She had to wrap her arms around his waist to keep from sliding off. Hold on, he said. Then they were moving. Almost. The ride was brutal. Wind screamed across the open country, carrying snow that stung like needles. Iris buried her face against Caleb's back, trying to block it out. He didn't slow down, didn't stop, just kept the horse moving through drifts that came up past its chest. She lost track of time. Minutes blurred into each other. Her hands went numb. Her face went numb. Everything went numb. When they finally stopped, she almost didn't notice. Get down. Iris slid off the horse, her legs buckling. Caleb caught her arm, steadied her. She looked up. A house. Small, rough-built, surrounded by snow. A barn off to one side, a corral buried under drifts, smoke rising from a stone chimney. It wasn't much, but it was shelter. Caleb led the horse to the barn, Iris following like a ghost. Inside, he unsaddled quickly, rubbed the gelding down with a rag, tossed it some hay. Then he turned to Iris. You eat today? No. Yesterday? No. He nodded once, like that confirmed something. Come on. The house was warmer than she expected. Not warm, but warmer. A fire crackled in the stone hearth, casting long shadows across rough-planed walls. There was a table, 2 chairs, a narrow bed against the far wall. Shelves lined with jars and tools. A rifle mounted above the door. Caleb shrugged off his coat, hung it on a peg, moved to the fire and added another log. Then he crossed to a cupboard, pulled out bread, cheese, dried meat, set it on the table. Eat. Iris didn't need to be told twice. She sat, her hands shaking as she tore into the bread. It was hard. A day passed fresh, but she didn't care. She ate like she was starving, because she was. Caleb watched her for a moment, then poured water from a clay jug into a tin cup. Set it in front of her. Slow down. You'll make yourself sick. She tried, failed, kept eating. He turned away, busying himself with something near the shelves, giving her space. When she finally slowed, the edge of hunger dulled, he came back to the table, sat across from her. My name's Caleb Rourke. Iris Vale. Where you from, Iris? Missouri, originally. Long way from home. It's not home anymore. Caleb nodded. What were you doing before the fire? Worked at a boarding house, cooking, cleaning. And before that? Iris hesitated. Different things. You running from someone? I already told you no. You already lied once. She met his eyes. I'm not running from the law, if that's what you're asking. That's not what I'm asking. Iris looked down at the table. There was a man back in Kansas. He thought I owed him something. I didn't agree. He come after you? He tried. Where is he now? I don't know. I left before he could find me. Caleb leaned back in his chair. He finds you here. He's got a problem. Why? Because this is my land, and I don't let people take what's mine. Iris blinked. I'm not yours. Not yet. The words hung in the air. She stared at him, trying to parse the meaning. Caleb didn't look away. What are you saying? She asked carefully. I'm saying you need work, and I need help. But I'm not looking for a cook or a maid. Then what are you looking for? Caleb was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was flat, matter-of-fact. A wife. Iris laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was absurd. Because she'd just walked 15 miles through a blizzard, nearly frozen to death, eaten her first meal in 2 days, and now a man she'd met an hour ago was proposing marriage. You're joking. I'm not. You don't even know me. I know enough. You know nothing. Caleb shrugged. I know you walked into a saloon full of men and asked for honest work. I know you didn't flinch when they laughed at you. I know you didn't run when I brought you here. That doesn't mean I'd marry you. Why not? Because, Iris stopped, tried to organize her thoughts. Because people don't do that. You don't marry a stranger. People do it all the time out here. Not like this. Exactly like this. Caleb leaned forward. You think half the marriages in this territory started with love? They started with need. Two people who needed something the other one had. Security, labor, company, a reason to keep going. That's not a marriage. That's a transaction. Maybe, but it works. Iris shook her head. You're insane. Probably. I don't even like you. You don't know me well enough to like me. That's my point. Caleb stood, walked to the fire, stared into it, his back to her. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter. I'm not asking you to love me, Iris. I'm asking you to help me run a ranch. That's it. I need someone who can work. Someone who won't break when things get hard. Someone who's not afraid of a little blood and dirt. He turned to face her. In exchange, you get a roof, food, protection, a name that means something out here. And when I die, you get the land. What if I say no? Then I'll take you back to town tomorrow, and you can try your luck somewhere else. Iris looked at him, really looked. At the lines around his eyes, the set of his jaw, the way he held himself like a man who'd already lost everything that mattered. Why me? She asked. Because you're still standing. Autumn. She didn't say yes that night. Caleb didn't push. Just told her she could sleep in the bed, that he'd take the floor. She argued, said she'd take the floor. He ignored her, tossed her a blanket, and lay down near the fire without another word. Iris lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling. Her mind kept circling back to the same question. What did she have to lose? Nothing. That was the answer. She had nothing. No money, no prospects, no plan beyond surviving the next day. If she went back to Red Hollow, she'd be right back where she started, begging for scraps, one bad decision away from ending up in a crib or a ditch. Caleb's offer was insane, but it was also the only offer she had. And maybe that was enough. Or, when she woke, the fire was already blazing. Caleb sat at the table, drinking coffee from a battered tin cup. He looked up when she stirred. You sleep? A little. Iris sat up, pulling the blanket around her shoulders. You? Enough. She studied him. He didn't look like a man who'd slept. He looked like a man who'd been staring at ghosts all night. I've been thinking, she said. And? If I say yes, what happens? We get married. Today, if possible. Then we get to work. Just like that? Just like that. Iris took a breath. What if it doesn't work? What if I can't do it? Then you leave. That simple? That simple. She didn't believe him. Nothing was ever that simple, but she also didn't have a better option. All right, she said quietly. Yes. Caleb nodded once, set down his cup. Get dressed. We're going to town. They rode back through the same blizzard, Iris clinging to Caleb's back, her mind numb. Not from the cold this time, from the sheer unreality of what she'd just agreed to. Red Hollow looked half buried when they arrived. Snowdrifts piled against buildings, The streets empty except for a few stubborn souls shoveling paths. Caleb led the horse straight to a small clapboard church at the edge of town. Inside, a tired-looking preacher glanced up from a Bible, surprise flickering across his face. "Caleb, wasn't expecting you." "Need a wedding." The preacher blinked. "A what?" "A wedding. Me and her." Caleb gestured to Iris. The preacher stared. "You're serious?" "I am." "Caleb, I can't just—" "You can. I've got the license." Caleb pulled a folded paper from his coat pocket. "Picked it up last month." Iris's head snapped toward him. "You had a license?" "Figured I'd need it eventually." "You've been planning this." "Not this, but something." The preacher looked between them, clearly uncomfortable. "This doesn't seem—" "Reverend." Caleb's voice was flat. "You want to argue theology, we can do that. But it's 20 below outside, and I'm not asking for your opinion. I'm asking you to do your job." The preacher sighed. "Fine, but I'm noting in the register that this was your idea." "Noted, chum." The ceremony took 5 minutes. No flowers, no music, no witnesses, except the preacher's wife, who'd been dragged in from the back room. Iris stood beside Caleb in her torn coat, her boots still damp, and repeated words she barely heard. "Do you take this man?" "I do." "Do you take this woman?" "I do." "Then by the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife." Caleb didn't kiss her, just shook the preacher's hand, signed the register, and walked out. Iris followed. Outside, the snow was still falling. Caleb mounted the horse, pulled her up behind him, and they rode out of Red Hollow without looking back. The ranch felt different when they returned. Not physically, it was the same rough house, the same buried corral. But something had shifted. Iris wasn't a stranger anymore. She was a wife. She didn't know what that meant yet. Caleb dismounted, helped her down. "You should rest. Tomorrow's going to be hard." "What's tomorrow?" "Work." He disappeared into the barn, leaving Iris standing in the snow. She looked at the house, at the smoke rising from the chimney, at the endless white stretching in every direction. Then she went inside. The fire was still burning. The table was still there, the bed, the shelves. Nothing had changed, but everything had. She sat by the fire, pulled off her boots, and stared at her hands. They were cracked, red, raw from cold and work, and 1,000 small wounds she'd stopped noticing. She'd just married a stranger. It shouldn't have worked. But here's the thing, nobody tells you about desperation. It makes you brave. Or stupid. Iris wasn't sure which. Maybe both. She heard the door open. Caleb came in, shaking snow from his coat. He glanced at her, then moved to the cupboard, pulled out more bread, more cheese, set it on the table. "You didn't eat enough earlier." "I'm fine." "Eat anyway." She did. Not because she was hungry, because it was easier than arguing. When she finished, Caleb sat across from her. He didn't say anything, just looked at her with those unreadable eyes. "What?" Iris asked. "You're going to hate me in about 3 days." "Why?" "Because this place will break you if you let it, and I'm not going to stop it." "I didn't ask you to." "Good." He stood. "Get some sleep. We start at dawn." He took the floor again. Iris lay in the bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the wind howl outside. She'd gambled everything on a man she didn't know, and the only way to find out if she'd made the right choice was to survive long enough to see. Dawn came cold and gray, the kind of morning that made you question every decision that led you to this moment. Iris woke to the sound of boots on wood. Caleb was already up, moving around the cabin with the efficiency of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. She sat up, her body stiff from sleeping in an unfamiliar bed, her mind still foggy. "What time is it?" 5. Caleb pulled on his coat. "Get dressed. We've got animals to feed." "Now?" "Now." Iris swung her legs out of bed, wincing at the cold floor. She'd slept in her clothes, seemed safer that way, even if Caleb hadn't given her any reason to worry. Old habits. She pulled on her boots, wrapped herself in the coat Caleb had given her last night. It was too big, smelled like smoke and leather, but it was warmer than her own. Outside, the world was still dark. Snow reflected what little light came from the stars, giving everything a pale, ghostly quality. The wind had died down, but the cold was sharp enough to steal your breath. Caleb handed her a bucket. Chickens first. You have chickens? Had chickens. Most of them died last winter. Got 6 left. He led her to a small coop attached to the barn. Inside, the birds were huddled together on their roosts, fluffed up against the cold. Caleb showed her where the feed was kept, how much to scatter, how to check for eggs without getting pecked. They're not laying much this time of year, he said, but check anyway. Iris did. Found 2 eggs, handed them to Caleb. He nodded, moved on. Next was the barn. 2 cows, the big gelding from last night, the gray mare, and a mule that looked older than sin. Cows get milked morning and evening, Caleb said. Mare and gelding get fed twice a day, hay and oats. Mule gets hay. You know how to milk? A little. Show me. Iris approached the nearest cow, a brown and white spotted thing with patient eyes. She'd milked before years ago, but her hands were clumsy and cold. The first few squirts went everywhere except the bucket. Caleb watched without comment. When she finally got a rhythm going, he turned away, started forking hay into the stalls. By the time they finished, Iris's hands were cramping and her back ached. The sun still hadn't come up. That's the easy part, Caleb said. The hard part was everything else. Caleb didn't ease her into it, didn't give her time to adjust. He put her to work like she'd been doing this her whole life, and when she stumbled, he just waited for her to get back up. They hauled water from the well, broke ice with an axe, carried it bucket by bucket to the troughs. They mucked stalls, they split wood. They checked fences buried under snow, digging them out with shovels until Iris's shoulders screamed. Caleb didn't talk much, just pointed, explained once, then expected her to remember. When she made mistakes, and she made plenty, he corrected her without anger or patience, just facts. You're lifting wrong. Use your legs. That knot won't hold. Do it again. Watch your fingers. You lose one out here. It doesn't grow back. By midday, Iris was exhausted. Her hands were blistered. Her legs felt like water. But Caleb didn't stop, so she didn't either. They went back inside for a quick meal. Leftover bread, some kind of stew that had been simmering over the fire. It tasted like salt and grease and nothing else, but Iris ate it without complaint. Caleb ate standing up, one eye on the window. Storm's coming back, he said. Iris looked out. The sky had gone the color of old bruises, heavy and low. How can you tell? Wind changed, pressure dropped, animals know. How long do we have? Few hours, maybe less. He set down his bowl, pulled his coat back on. Come on. Where? Need to get the livestock secured. Last storm I lost a cow, wandered off, frozen adrift. Not letting that happen again. They spent the next 2 hours reinforcing the barn, nailing boards over gaps, stuffing rags into cracks. Caleb moved with grim determination, like he was preparing for a siege. Iris did her best to keep up. The wind picked up just as they finished. Snow started falling again, light at first, then heavier. By the time they made it back to the cabin, visibility was down to nothing. Inside, Caleb barred the door, checked the fire, then stood at the window for a long time. Iris peeled off her coat, her whole body shaking. Not just from cold, from exhaustion, from the bone-deep realization that this was her life now, every day, until one of them died or gave up. You did good today, Caleb said without turning around. Iris blinked. What? I said you did good. I can barely stand. But you're standing. He moved away from the window, grabbed a tin from the shelf, opened it, pulled out a rag and some kind of salve, handed it to her. For your hands. Iris looked down. Her palms were raw, blistered in places, bleeding in others. She hadn't even noticed. She took the tin, started rubbing the salve into her skin. It stung like hell, but after a minute the pain dulled. What is this? Beeswax, lard, some herbs. My wife used to make it. The cabin went quiet. Iris didn't know what to say to that. Caleb sat at the table, his shoulders slumped. For the first time since she'd met him, he looked tired. Not just physically, the kind of tired that came from carrying something too heavy for too long. You don't have to talk about her, Iris said carefully. Wasn't planning to. All right. But he kept talking anyway. Her name was Ellen. We were married 7 years. She was pregnant when she died. Baby too. Iris's throat tightened. I'm sorry. Don't be. You didn't do it. Still. Caleb looked at her then, his eyes flat. You know why I asked you to marry me? Because you needed help with the ranch. That's part of it. But the real reason is I couldn't stand being alone in this house anymore. Every corner of it reminded me of her, what we had, what I lost. He leaned back in his chair. I needed something to change, someone who didn't know her, didn't know me, someone who'd just see the work and get it done. That's all I am to you? Work? Right now? Yeah. Iris should have been angry, should have felt insulted, but she wasn't, because at least he was honest. Fair enough, she said. What was I to you yesterday? A stranger. And tomorrow? We'll see. Man. The storm raged for 3 days. Snow piled so high against the cabin that Caleb had to dig a tunnel to reach the barn. They worked in shifts, one of them outside tending the animals, the other inside keeping the fire going, melting snow for water, rationing food. The cabin felt smaller every day. 2 people who barely knew each other, trapped in a space meant for one, with nothing to do but survive. They didn't fight. That would have required energy neither of them had. But the silence stretched thin, weighted with all the things they weren't saying. On the second night, Iris finally broke. How long have you been out here? Caleb was sitting by the fire, sharpening a knife. 12 years. Alone? Not always. Had Ellen. Had hands once, but they left after she died. Why? Thought the place was cursed. Maybe they were right. You believe that? No, but I understand why they did. Iris pulled her knees up to her chest, the blanket wrapped around her shoulders. You ever think about leaving, starting over somewhere else? Every day? So why don't you? Caleb tested the edge of the knife against his thumb. Because running doesn't fix anything, just moves the problem. Maybe the problem is the place. No, the problem's in here. He tapped his chest. Can't outrun that. Iris didn't have an answer for that. She knew what he meant. She'd tried running too. It hadn't worked. What about you? Caleb asked. You ever think about going back to Missouri? There's nothing to go back to. Family? Dead, or might as well be. The man you were running from, he have a name? Iris hesitated. Clayton. He hurt you? He tried. What'd you do? Stabbed him. Caleb looked up, something like approval flickering across his face. He die? I don't know. Didn't stick around to find out. Good. He went back to sharpening the knife. Iris watched the firelight play across his face, the way his jaw worked when he was thinking. You're not what I expected, she said. What'd you expect? I don't know. Someone meaner, I guess. More desperate. I am desperate, just not mean. Why not? Because mean doesn't get the work done, just makes people hate you. You care if I hate you? Caleb set the knife down, looked at her straight. Yeah, I do. What? On the third day, the storm finally broke. The wind died. The snow stopped. The sky cleared to a blue so bright it hurt to look at. Caleb went out first, checking the tunnel, making sure it was stable. Iris followed, squinting against the glare. The world had been remade overnight, everything buried, smoothed over, unrecognizable. Barn first, Caleb said. They dug their way through, the snow packed so hard it felt like digging through stone. When they finally reached the barn, Caleb pushed the door open. All the animals were alive. Cold, hungry, pissed off, but alive. Caleb let out a breath Iris hadn't realized he'd been holding. They spent the rest of the day digging out. The well, the chicken coop, the paths between buildings. By the time the sun started to set, Iris could barely lift her arms. But they'd done it. They'd survived. That night, Caleb made something that almost resembled a real meal. Salt pork, beans, cornbread that was more char than bread. Iris ate it like it was a feast. You're getting stronger, Caleb said. I'm getting tired. That too. Iris set down her fork. Can I ask you something? Sure. What happens when winter's over, when the work gets easier? Work doesn't get easier, just different. You know what I mean. Caleb pushed his plate away. You're asking what happens with us. Yeah. I don't know. That's it? You don't know? That's it. Iris laughed, sharp and bitter. You really don't think ahead, do you? Thinking ahead hasn't done me much good. So we just keep going, day after day, until what? Until it feels right, or until it doesn't. And if it doesn't, then you leave. Just like that. Just like that. Iris shook her head. You're the strangest man I've ever met. I'll take that as a compliment. Winter dragged on. More storms came, each one testing them in different ways. Iris learned fast how to read the sky, how to move through snow without exhausting herself, how to keep her hands warm enough to work. She learned the rhythms of the ranch, the needs of the animals, the 100 small tasks that kept everything running. She also learned Caleb. Learned that he woke before dawn every day without fail, that he drank his coffee black and scalding, that he hated waste of any kind, food, water, words, that he could go hours without speaking, then suddenly say something that knocked the wind out of her. Learned that he had nightmares. She'd wake in the middle of the night to hear him muttering in his sleep, words she couldn't make out, his voice rough with something between grief and rage. She never mentioned it, neither did he, but the space between them started to shift. Slowly, imperceptibly, like ice melting at the edges. It happened in small moments. Caleb teaching her how to throw an axe, standing behind her to correct her stance, his hands on her shoulders. The way he'd started setting aside the bigger portions of food for her without comment. The time she'd cut her hand on a piece of wire and he'd stopped everything to bandage it. His touch careful, almost gentle. The way he'd started looking at her when he thought she wasn't paying attention. One night, maybe 6 weeks after the wedding, Iris was mending a shirt by the fire when Caleb spoke up. You sing? She looked up. What? I heard you humming yesterday, in the barn. Sounded nice. Iris felt her face heat. I didn't know you were listening. Wasn't trying to, just noticed. It's nothing, just something my mother used to sing. Sing it now. No. Why not? Because I don't perform. Caleb smiled. It was the first real smile she'd seen from him, small and crooked. Who said anything about performing? Just sing. Iris set down the shirt. You're serious. I am. She didn't know why she did it. Maybe because his smile had caught her off guard. Maybe because she was tired of the silence. But she started singing, low and quiet, a melody her mother had taught her before the world got hard. It wasn't pretty. Her voice cracked in places. But she kept going, and Caleb listened without moving, his eyes on the fire. When she finished, the cabin was quiet except for the crackle of burning wood. Your mother teach you that? Caleb asked. Yeah. She have a good voice? Better than mine. Doubt that. Iris looked at him. You trying to charm me? Maybe. Why? Because you've been here 2 months and I still don't know how to talk to you. You're talking now. Yeah, but it's different. How? Caleb rubbed his jaw, searching for words. Ellen and I grew up together. I knew her my whole life. Everything between us made sense because we had history. But you and me, we're just, he gestured vaguely, we're just trying to figure it out as we go. That bother you? Sometimes. Me too. He looked at her then, really looked, and something passed between them. Not love, not yet, but recognition. The acknowledgement that they were both in this mess together, stumbling forward with no map. I'm glad you stayed, Caleb said quietly. Iris's throat tightened. Where else was I going to go? You could have left after the first week. Would have been justified. And freeze to death in the snow? No thanks. You know what I mean. She did. I'm not a quitter, Caleb. I know. And I don't run. Not anymore. Good. He stood, stretched. I'm turning in. You should too. Tomorrow's going to be hell. Why? Cow's about to calve, probably overnight. Iris groaned. Of course she is. Caleb was right. They woke at 3 a.m. to the sound of distressed lowing from the barn. By the time they got dressed and outside, the cow, a big roan named Bess, was already in labor, thrashing in her stall. She's early, Caleb muttered. Damn it. What do we do? Help her. Or try to. Iris had never birthed anything in her life. Caleb had, but even he looked tense, his jaw set in that way that meant he was worried. They worked through the early morning hours, Caleb's hands inside the cow, trying to guide the calf, Iris holding a lantern and doing her best not to panic when Bess kicked or bellowed. Blood soaked the straw. The smell was overwhelming, iron and sweat and fear. "Come on, girl," Caleb said through gritted teeth. "Come on!" The calf came out wrong, back feet first. Caleb had to pull hard, harder than should have been safe, and when it finally slid free, it wasn't moving. Damn it! Caleb grabbed the calf, wiped mucus from its nose and mouth, rubbed its chest hard. "Breathe. Come on, breathe." Nothing. Iris felt her heart drop. After everything, after all that work. The calf gasped. Its sides heaved. It gasped again, legs twitching, alive. Caleb sat back, his hands shaking. All right, all right." Bess turned her head, lowing softly, and started licking her baby. Caleb stood, wiping blood on his pants, and for a moment he just stood there, his shoulders slumped. Iris put a hand on his arm. "You did it! We did it!" "I just held the light." "You stayed. That's more than most people would have done." They stood there in the lantern light, watching the calf struggle to its feet, all wobbly legs and wet fur. It was a small, fragile thing, but it was alive. And somehow, that felt like enough. Spring came slowly. The snow didn't melt all at once. It receded in patches, revealing dead grass and frozen mud. The bones of the ranch laid bare. Caleb said it was the ugliest time of year, everything dead but not yet reborn. Iris thought it was beautiful, because it meant they'd survived. The work changed. Less about survival, more about rebuilding. They repaired fences, cleared irrigation ditches, plowed fields for planting. Caleb ordered seeds from town, and Iris learned how to start them in trays near the cabin's one good window. She also started taking over more of the household work, not because Caleb asked, but because it needed doing, and she was there. She learned to bake bread that didn't taste like ash, to make stews that had actual flavor, to patch clothes well enough that they'd last another season. The cabin stopped feeling like Caleb's space, started feeling like theirs. One evening in late March, Iris was outside collecting eggs when she heard hoofbeats. She looked up to see two riders approaching. One older man, grizzled and bow-legged, the other younger, barely 20. Caleb came out of the barn, his hand resting on the rifle he kept near the door. "Easy," the older man called. "Just passing through." "Then keep passing." Now, that's not very neighborly. Neighborly would be staying on the road. The man grinned, showing gaps where teeth used to be. "Heard you got yourself a wife, Rourke. Wanted to see if it was true." Iris walked over to stand beside Caleb, the egg basket in her hands. "It's true." The man's eyes raked over her, slow and deliberate. "Well, ain't you a pretty thing?" "Watch your mouth," Caleb said, his voice flat. "Just making conversation. Make it somewhere else." "Where?" The younger rider shifted in his saddle, his hand drifting toward his belt. Caleb didn't move, but Iris saw his shoulders tighten. "We're not looking for trouble," the older man said. "Just curious. Word around Red Hollow is you married some girl nobody had ever seen before. People are talking." "Let them talk." "Heard she's running from something. That true, sweetheart?" Iris met his gaze, kept her voice steady. "I'm not running from anything." "That's so?" "That's so." The man studied her for a long moment, then laughed. "All right then, we'll be on our way." He tipped his hat mockingly. "You take care now, Mrs. Rourke." They rode off, disappearing over the ridge. Caleb stood watching until they were out of sight. "Friends of yours?" Iris asked. "No." "Then who were they?" "Drifters." "Maybe worse." He turned to her. "If they come back, you get inside and bar the door. Don't open it for anyone but me." "You think they'll come back?" "I don't know, but I'm not taking chances." That night, Caleb slept with the rifle next to him. They didn't come back. But the encounter left Iris unsettled. She'd known, in the abstract, that marrying Caleb had changed her status, given her a name, a place, protection, but she hadn't thought about what that meant to the outside world, how people would see her, judge her. "They think I trapped you," she said one morning as they worked in the garden. "Those men, people in town." Caleb didn't look up from the row he was hoeing. "Probably." "Does that bother you?" "No." "Why not?" "Because I know the truth." "That's enough." Iris jabbed her spade into the dirt, harder than necessary. It bothers me. Why? Because it's not true. I didn't trick you into anything. You asked me. You proposed. I know. So why don't you tell people that? Caleb stopped working, straightened. Because it's none of their business. What happens between us stays between us. Anyone else's opinion doesn't matter.
Easy for you to say. You've lived here your whole life. These people know you. And now they know you. As what? The desperate woman who conned you into marriage? Caleb crossed the garden in 3 strides, stopped in front of her. Listen to me. I don't care what they think, and you shouldn't either. You want to prove them wrong? Then do the work. Be the person you said you were. That's all that matters out here.
Iris looked up at him, at the dirt on his face, the sweat on his shirt, the seriousness in his eyes. You really believe that? She asked. I do. Something shifted in her chest. Not love, not yet, but something close. Respect, maybe. Trust. All right, she said quietly. Then that's what I'll do. April brought rain, not the soft spring showers Iris remembered from Missouri, but hard driving storms that turned the ground to soup and the creek to a raging torrent. They lost part of the fence to flooding, spent 2 days rebuilding it in waist-deep mud. But the rain also brought green. Grass pushed up through the dead stalks, tender and bright. Wildflowers bloomed in the meadow beyond the house. Lupine, paintbrush, columbine. The calf grew stronger, following Bess everywhere on ungainly legs. And Iris started to feel something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Not the fragile, desperate hope of survival, but the solid, grounded hope that came from building something real. One evening, after a long day of work, she and Caleb sat on the porch, a luxury now that the weather was warmer. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. I've been thinking, Iris said. About? Chickens. We should get more. If we're going to make it through next winter, we need more eggs. Caleb nodded slowly. You're right. I'll head into town next week, see what's available. I could come with you. He glanced at her. You want to? Might be nice to see something other than this place. Town's not much. Better than nothing. Caleb smiled, that small, crooked smile that still caught her off guard. All right, we'll go together. They sat in silence for a while, watching the light fade. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called. Caleb's hand rested on the porch rail, inches from hers. Iris looked at it, thought about reaching over. Didn't, not yet, but maybe soon. Caleb? Yeah? Thanks for this. For what? Giving me a chance. He turned to look at her, his expression unreadable. You gave yourself the chance. All I did was open the door. Still, most people wouldn't have. Most people are fools. Iris laughed, surprised. Is that your way of saying I'm smart? It's my way of saying you're tougher than you look. I'll take it. They stayed there until full dark. 2 people who'd started as strangers slowly becoming something else. The trip to Red Hollow happened on a Tuesday. They left early, the wagon rattling over ruts still soft from spring rain. Caleb drove, his eyes on the road, while Iris sat beside him watching the landscape unfold. She hadn't been off the ranch since their wedding day, and the world felt bigger than she remembered, wider, stranger, full of possibilities she'd forgotten existed. You nervous? Caleb asked. About what? Seeing people? Answering questions? Iris shrugged. Let them ask. But she was nervous. Her hands kept smoothing her skirt, checking her hair. She'd washed that morning with heated water, put on the cleanest dress she owned, still patched and worn, but better than what she'd arrived in. Caleb had noticed, though he hadn't said anything. Just nodded once, like she'd passed some test she didn't know she was taking. Red Hollow looked different in daylight, less desperate, more ordinary. A main street lined with false front buildings, mud thick between the boardwalks. People going about their business with the tired efficiency of those who'd survived another winter. Caleb pulled the wagon up outside the general store. Chickens first, then supplies. They climbed down. Iris felt eyes on her immediately. A woman sweeping a porch across the street, 2 men loading a wagon, a group of children playing in the alley. Word traveled fast in small towns. Everyone knew who she was, or thought they did. Inside the store, a bell jangled above the door. The proprietor, a thin man with spectacles and nervous hands, looked up from his ledger. "Caleb, didn't expect you. Need to buy some chickens. You got any? Might. Depends on how many you're looking for." 6. 8 if they're good layers. The man's eyes slid to Iris. "This the wife?" "This is Iris." "Ma'am." He didn't offer his hand, just studied her like she was merchandise he was trying to price. "Heard you got married. Quick business, that." "It was," Caleb said flatly. "About those chickens?" The proprietor pulled his attention back. "Got a dozen out back. You can take your pick. $3 each." "That's robbery. That's the price." Caleb's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue, just nodded. "Show me." They followed him to the yard behind the store where chickens scratched in the dirt inside a wire pen. Caleb examined them with the careful eye of someone who knew what he was looking at, checking combs, feeling breastbones, watching how they moved. "These 4, he said finally, "and those 3 over there." 7 birds, $21. Caleb paid without flinching, though Iris knew that was most of what they'd saved for supplies. The proprietor caught the chickens, stuffed them into crates, and handed them over. "Pleasure doing business," he said, though his tone suggested otherwise. Back inside, they bought flour, salt, sugar, coffee, a few other essentials. The proprietor tallied everything up, his pen scratching across paper, while Iris wandered the aisles, looking at things they couldn't afford. Bolts of fabric, ready-made dresses, a set of china plates that probably cost more than the ranch made in a year. "Iris!" She turned. Caleb was at the counter, settling the bill. She joined him, watched him count out coins with the same careful precision he used for everything. They were loading the wagon when a voice called out. "Well, if it isn't the newlyweds." Iris looked up. The older man from before, the one who'd ridden out to the ranch, was leaning against the post outside the saloon, a bottle in his hand. The younger one stood beside him, grinning. Caleb didn't acknowledge them, just kept loading. "Hey, Rourke, I'm talking to you." "I heard you." "That's rude. Ignoring a man when he's being friendly." "You're not being friendly, you're being drunk." The older man laughed. "Maybe, but I'm curious. How's married life treating you?" "Fine." "That's so. Your little wife keeping you warm at night?" Caleb stopped, his hand on a sack of flour, turned slowly. "You got something to say? Say it." "Just wondering if she's worth what you paid for her." Iris felt her face burn, but before she could respond, Caleb was moving. He crossed the space between them in 3 strides, grabbed the man by his shirt, and slammed him against the post hard enough to rattle the boards. "You insult my wife again," Caleb said quietly, "and I'll break your jaw." The younger man stepped forward, his hand going to his belt. Caleb didn't even look at him. "You want a piece of this? Go ahead, but you better be ready to finish it." The kid hesitated. The older man wheezed out a laugh. "Easy, Rourke, just having a little fun." "Find someone else to have fun with." Caleb let him go, turned back to the wagon. The 2 men watched him, something ugly passing between them, but they didn't follow. Iris climbed onto the wagon seat, her heart pounding. Caleb took the reins, snapped them once, and they rolled out of town without another word. They were a mile down the road before Iris spoke. "You didn't have to do that." "Yeah, I did. I can handle a few insults. Maybe, but I can't." Iris looked at him. His jaw was set, his knuckles white on the reins. "You're angry." "I am. At them or at me. At them for saying it, at myself for bringing you here." "Caleb, I knew people would talk, but hearing it, seeing the way they looked at you." He shook his head. "You deserve better than that. I chose this. You didn't force me. Doesn't matter. You're my wife. That means something." Iris felt something tight in her chest loosen. "It means something to me, too." Caleb glanced at her, his expression softening. "Good." They rode in silence for a while, the wagon creaking, the chickens clucking softly in their crates. The sun was warm on Iris's face. The air smelled like grass and earth and possibility. "Caleb?" "Yeah?" "Thank you for standing up for me." "You don't need to thank me for that." "I do, though. Nobody's ever—" She stopped, searching for the right words. "Nobody's ever defended me like that before." Caleb looked at her for a long moment. Then he reached over and took her hand. It was the first time he'd touched her like that, not to help her onto a horse or guide her through a task, but just to touch. His hand was rough, calloused, warm. Iris's breath caught. "You're not alone anymore," he said quietly. "Get used to it." Summer arrived fast, like it had been waiting. The days stretched long and hot, the sun turning the valley into a furnace by mid-afternoon. Work started at dawn and ended at dusk, everything dictated by the heat. They planted corn, beans, squash, rows and rows of it, back-breaking work that left them both exhausted. But the ranch was coming alive. The chickens laid eggs again, enough to eat some and sell the rest. The garden flourished, green and wild. The calf grew into a sturdy young heifer, and Bess was pregnant again. Caleb talked about buying another horse, maybe a few pigs. "We're doing good," he said one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the fireflies. "You sound surprised." "I am. Last year this time I was barely scraping by. Thought I'd lose the place." "What changed?" Caleb looked at her. "You know what changed." Iris felt her face warm. "I'm just doing the work." "Yeah, but you're doing it with me. That's different." They'd settled into a rhythm, the two of them. Not comfortable yet. There were still awkward silences, moments of friction, nights when Iris woke to hear Caleb pacing, but something real. Something that felt like it might last. The sleeping arrangements had stayed the same. Caleb on the floor, Iris in the bed. She'd offered to switch a dozen times, but he always refused. "I'm used to it," he'd say. But Iris wasn't. Every night she'd lie awake listening to him breathe, aware of the space between them, the distance that was starting to feel less like safety and more like cowardice. One night in late June, she finally broke. "Caleb." "Yeah." "This is stupid." "What is?" "You sleeping on the floor. There's a bed right here." "It's fine." "It's not fine. Your back's killing you, I can tell." "I'm managing." Iris sat up, looked down at him in the firelight. "We're married. It wouldn't be wrong." Caleb was quiet for a long time. "I know." "Then why?" "Because I don't want you to feel obligated." "Obligated to what? Sleep in the same bed? We're adults, Caleb." "It's not just that." "Then what is it?" He sat up, rubbed his face. "I don't want to take something you're not ready to give." Iris felt her throat tighten. "What if I'm ready?" "Are you?" She didn't answer right away. Because the truth was complicated. She was attracted to him, had been for weeks now, though she hadn't admitted it to herself. The way he moved, the quiet strength in him, the way he looked at her sometimes like she was something valuable. But attraction wasn't the same as readiness. "I don't know," she said finally. "But I know I'm tired of pretending there's nothing between us." Caleb looked at her, his eyes unreadable. "What do you want, Iris?" "I want to stop being afraid." "Of what?" "Of this. Of you. Of wanting something that might disappear." "I'm not going anywhere." "You don't know that." "Yeah, I do." He stood, crossed to the bed, sat on the edge, close enough that she could feel the heat of him, close enough to touch. "Listen to me," he said quietly. "I'm not going to rush you. I'm not going to push. But I need you to understand something. This," he gestured between them, "this isn't temporary for me. I'm not waiting for something better to come along. You're it." Iris's breath hitched. "You don't mean that." "I do." "You barely know me." "I know enough. I know you're strong. I know you don't quit. I know you make this place feel less empty." He reached out, hesitated, then tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "I know I want you here, not just for the work. For you." Iris closed her eyes, feeling the weight of his words settle over her. "I'm scared." "Of what?" "That I'll disappoint you, that I'm not who you think I am." "You're exactly who I think you are, and that's enough." When she opened her eyes, he was watching her with an intensity that made her chest ache. She reached up, touched his face. He leaned into it, his beard rough against her palm. "Stay here tonight," she said softly. "With me." "You sure?" "I'm sure." Caleb lay down beside her, still dressed, still careful. But he was there, close enough that she could hear his heartbeat, feel his warmth. Iris turned on her side, her back to him, and after a moment she felt his arm come around her waist. They stayed like that until morning. Something shifted after that night. Not all at once. Not with grand declarations or dramatic moments. Just small changes, the kind you only notice when you look back. Caleb started touching her more. A hand on her shoulder when he passed, his fingers brushing hers when they worked side by side. Iris stopped flinching away, started leaning in. They shared the bed every night now, sometimes talking until late, sometimes just lying in the dark listening to each other breathe. They didn't consummate the marriage. Not yet. But it felt inevitable, like water building behind a dam. One afternoon in July, Iris was in the garden pulling weeds when she heard hoofbeats again. She looked up, her stomach dropping, half expecting those men from town. But it was a woman this time, middle-aged, sturdy, with graying hair and a no-nonsense expression. She rode up to the house, dismounted, and tied her horse to the rail. "You must be Iris," she called. Iris stood, brushing dirt from her hands. "I am. I'm Margaret Hensley. I've got a place about 10 miles south." "Nice to meet you." Margaret looked her over, frank and appraising. "Heard Caleb got married. Wanted to see for myself if the rumors were true." "Which rumors?" "That he married a stranger in a snowstorm. That you're half his age and running from the law. That you can't cook worth a damn and the ranch is falling apart." Iris felt her spine stiffen. "And what do you think now that you've seen me?" Margaret smiled. "I think the people spreading those rumors are idiots." The tension in Iris's shoulders eased. "You want to come inside? I can make coffee." "I'd like that." They went into the cabin. Iris put the kettle on, pulled out 2 cups. Margaret looked around with interest, taking in the clean floors, the mended curtains, the jars of preserves lined up on the shelves. "Place looks good," she said. "Better than it has in years." "Caleb works hard." "So do you, from the looks of it." Iris poured the coffee, set a cup in front of Margaret. "Why are you really here?" Margaret took a sip, nodded approvingly. "Direct. I like that. Truth is, I wanted to meet the woman who got Caleb Rourke to smile again." "He smiles?" "Not often. But word is he's been seen doing it. That's your doing." Iris felt her face heat. "I don't know about that." "I do. I've known Caleb since he was a boy. Good man. Too good, maybe. Ellen's death nearly killed him. Seeing him start over, that matters. We're just trying to make the ranch work. It's more than that. And you know it." Iris looked down at her cup. "It's complicated." "Marriage always is, especially out here." Margaret leaned back in her chair. "I came here 20 years ago with my husband. Didn't know a damn thing about ranching. First year, I wanted to leave every single day, but I stayed. And you know what? It got easier. Not easy, but easier." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I see myself in you, that same look, like you're not sure if you made the right choice." Margaret reached across the table, covered Iris's hand with hers. "You did. And if anyone in town gives you trouble, you send them to me." Iris felt her throat tighten. "Thank you." "Don't thank me. Just keep doing what you're doing, and maybe come by for a visit sometime. I could use the company." "I'd like that." They talked for another hour, about the weather, about ranching, about the small dramas of frontier life. When Margaret finally left, Iris stood on the porch watching her ride away, feeling lighter than she had in months. Caleb came back from the south pasture at sunset, tired and dusty. Iris met him at the barn. "We had a visitor," she said. "Who?" "Margaret Hensley." Caleb looked surprised. "Margaret came all the way out here?" "She wanted to meet me." "What'd she say?" "That the rumors are wrong. That the ranch looks good. That I should keep doing what I'm doing." Caleb smiled. That small, crooked smile that still did something to her. "She's right." "About which part?" "All of it." He pulled her into his arms, and Iris went willingly, resting her head against his chest. His heart beat steady under her ear. He smelled like sweat and horses and sun-baked earth. "I'm glad you're here," he said quietly. "Me too, Jat." August hit like a hammer. Heat shimmered off the ground in waves, turning the air thick and hard to breathe. The creek dropped to a trickle. The grass turned brown. They hauled water twice a day, every day, trying to keep the animals from suffering. And Iris got sick. It started small, a little nausea in the mornings, fatigue that didn't match the work. She ignored it at first, chalked it up to the heat, But when she started vomiting in the mornings, she couldn't ignore it anymore. Caleb noticed. Of course he did. "You need to see a doctor," he said one morning after she'd come back from retching in the bushes. "I'm fine." "You're not fine. This has been going on for a week. It's just the heat." "It's not the heat." Iris looked at him, saw the concern in his eyes, and felt something twist in her gut. Because she'd been thinking the same thing, but she hadn't wanted to say it out loud. "Caleb, when was your last monthly?" Her face went hot. "I don't know. I haven't been keeping track." "Guess." 2 months. Maybe 3. Caleb sat down heavily at the table. "You're pregnant." "You don't know that." "I know that. And so do you." Iris sat across from him, her hands shaking. "This wasn't supposed to happen yet." "Why not? We're married." "But we didn't." She stopped. "Because that wasn't true, was it?" 3 weeks ago, on a night when the heat had been unbearable and they'd both been restless, things had finally tipped over. It had been awkward, fumbling, not like the romance novels made it sound, but it had been real. And apparently, it had been enough. "I don't know if I'm ready for this," Iris said quietly. Caleb reached across the table, took her hand. "You think I am?" "You wanted this. You said you wanted a family." "I do. But that doesn't mean I'm not scared." Iris looked up at him. "What if something goes wrong? Then we'll deal with it. What if I'm like—" She stopped, unable to say it. "Like Ellen?" Caleb's voice was rough. "You're not her. And this isn't then." "You don't know that." "No, but I'm not going to let fear stop us from living." Iris felt tears prick her eyes. She blinked them back, angry at herself for being weak. "I'm sorry." "For what?" "For being afraid. For not being stronger." Caleb stood, came around the table, pulled her up into his arms. "You're the strongest person I know, and you're allowed to be scared." She buried her face in his chest, feeling his arms solid around her. "What are we going to do?" "We're going to get through this. Together." The pregnancy wasn't easy. The sickness lasted weeks, leaving Iris weak and irritable. She couldn't keep food down, couldn't stand the smell of coffee or meat. Caleb took over more of the work, moving through the days with grim determination. Margaret came by when she heard the news, brought herbs and advice, and a bluntness that Iris found comforting. "First trimester's always hell," she said, "but it passes. You'll get through it." "What if I don't?" "Then we deal with it. But you're strong. You'll be fine." Iris wanted to believe her, but every day felt like a battle, against the nausea, against the fear, against the voice in her head that said she wasn't cut out for this. One night in September, she woke to cramping. Sharp, sudden, like something tearing. She gasped, doubled over, and Caleb was awake instantly. "What's wrong?" "I don't know, something's—" She gasped again, the pain radiating through her. Caleb lit a lamp, checked the bed. No blood. That was good. But the cramps kept coming, wave after wave. "We need to get you to a doctor." "It's the middle of the night." "I don't care." He dressed quickly, got the wagon ready, bundled Iris in blankets. The ride to town was a nightmare, every bump sending fresh pain through her body, every minute stretching like hours. The doctor was old, grumpy at being woken, but he examined her carefully. When he finally straightened, his expression was unreadable. "She's all right," he said. "Baby, too." Iris felt her whole body sag with relief. "What was that?" "Cramping. Not uncommon in the 2nd month. But you need to rest. No heavy lifting, no long days in the field. If you don't, you might lose it." "She'll rest," Caleb said firmly. The ride back was quieter. Iris leaned against Caleb's shoulder, exhausted, her hand on her stomach where something small and fragile was growing. "I'm sorry," she said. "Stop apologizing." "I'm scared." "I know, so am I." "What if—" "No, what ifs. We just take it one day at a time." Iris nodded, closing her eyes. One day at a time. She could do that. She had to. The weeks that followed were strange. Iris stayed close to the cabin, doing light work, mending, cooking, tending the chickens. Caleb did everything else, pushing himself harder than he should have. She could see the strain in him, the way his shoulders tightened, the way he moved like a man carrying too much weight. But he didn't complain, just kept going. One afternoon, she found him standing by the creek, staring at the water. She walked over, stood beside him. "You all right?" "Yeah." "You're lying." Caleb smiled faintly. "Maybe." "Talk to me." He was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. "I keep thinking about Ellen, about what happened." "Caleb, she was strong, stronger than you'd think, but pregnancy, it broke something in her, and when the baby came early." He stopped, his jaw working. "I couldn't save them, either of them." Iris took his hand. "That wasn't your fault. Doesn't matter, it happened. And you think it'll happen again." "I don't know, but I can't lose you, Iris, I can't." She turned to face him, put her hands on his face. "You're not going to lose me, you hear me? I'm not going anywhere. You can't promise that. Maybe not, but I can promise I'll fight, and I will." Caleb pulled her close, held her tight enough that she could feel him shaking. They stood like that for a long time, two people clinging to each other against the weight of fear and memory and hope. When they finally pulled apart, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of fire. "Come on," Iris said. "Let's go home." They walked back to the cabin together, hand in hand, the future uncertain but shared. And they did go home, but home felt different now, weighted with possibility and fear in equal measure. October arrived with crisp mornings and the first real cold since spring. The nausea finally eased, and Iris started to feel like herself again. Her body changed in small ways, a slight roundness to her belly, a fullness in her face. Caleb watched her like she might break, which drove her crazy. "I'm pregnant, not dying," she said one morning when he tried to take the water bucket from her hands. "I know that." "Then stop treating me like glass." "Can't help it." "Try harder." He did try, but she caught him watching anyway, that crease between his eyebrows that meant he was worrying. She understood it, knew where it came from, but understanding didn't make it less suffocating. Margaret visited more often now, bringing practical gifts. Baby clothes her own children had outgrown, soft and worn but clean. A cradle her husband had built decades ago. Advice delivered without sugarcoating. "Labor's going to hurt like hell," she said bluntly. "Anyone tells you different is lying, but you'll get through it. Women always do." "That's not very comforting." "It's not meant to be comforting. It's meant to be true." Iris found herself grateful for Margaret's presence. The older woman didn't coddle or pity, just treated her like someone capable of handling hard things. It made the fear feel less enormous. One afternoon, Margaret brought her daughter along. Sarah was 16, quiet, with her mother's steady eyes and work-roughened hands. She helped Iris hang laundry while Margaret and Caleb talked fences. "My ma says you're brave," Sarah said, pinning a sheet to the line. Iris laughed. "Your ma's being generous. She doesn't say things she doesn't mean." "Then she sees something I don't." Sarah looked at her thoughtfully. "You came here with nothing, married a stranger, made a home in the middle of nowhere. That sounds brave to me." "It sounds desperate." "Maybe. But there's different kinds of desperate. The kind that makes you small and the kind that makes you fight. You're the fighting kind." Iris felt something warm settle in her chest. "Thanks. Welcome." They worked in comfortable silence after that, the wind carrying the smell of wood smoke and fallen leaves. When the laundry was hung and Margaret was ready to leave, Sarah gave Iris a quick, awkward hug. "Come visit us sometime," she said. "Gets lonely out here. Nice to have neighbors." "I will." After they left, Caleb came to stand beside Iris on the porch. "You like them," he said. Not a question. "I do. Margaret's good people." "She is. Known her since I was a kid. She was the one who helped Ellen." He stopped, cleared his throat. "She knows what she's doing. When the time comes, she'll be there." Iris took his hand. "I know." They stood watching the sun drop toward the mountains, the sky bleeding orange and red. Caleb's thumb traced circles on the back of her hand, absent and soothing. "I've been thinking," he said. "About?" "Names for the baby." Iris looked up at him, surprised. "Already?" "Might as well. You got any ideas?" "Not really." "You?" "If it's a boy—" He hesitated. "I was thinking Samuel, after my father." "I like that." "And if it's a girl, maybe Rose.
Ellen always liked that name. Iris tensed slightly. Caleb felt it, glanced down. Is that all right? He asked. I know it might seem, it's fine, Iris said quickly, too quickly. You sure? She wasn't, but she also wasn't going to say so. Yeah.
Caleb studied her face, then nodded slowly. We don't have to decide now. No, really. Rose is nice. But the name sat heavy in her mouth, and she knew Caleb could tell. They didn't talk about it again that night, but it lingered between them like smoke. November brought the first snow. Not much, just a dusting that melted by noon, but enough to remind them winter was coming. Caleb went into overdrive, preparing like he was expecting a siege, stacking firewood until it reached the eaves, salting meat, checking and rechecking the barn roof for weak spots. Iris helped where she could, but her body was changing faster now. Her balance was off. Her back ached constantly. Simple tasks left her winded. This is humiliating, she muttered one afternoon, sitting down hard after carrying a single bucket of water. Caleb looked over from where he was splitting wood. What is? Being useless. You're not useless. I can barely do anything. You're growing a person. That's not nothing. It feels like nothing when you're doing everything. Caleb set down the axe, came to sit beside her on the porch step. You know what Ellen used to say when she was pregnant? Iris stiffened. What? That she felt like a barn full of hay, big, slow, and in the way. He smiled faintly. Drove her crazy. But I told her the same thing I'm telling you. Your job right now is to keep that baby safe. Everything else is secondary. That's easy for you to say. You're not the one sitting around while someone else does the work. No, but I'd trade places with you in a heartbeat if I could. Iris looked at him, saw the truth of it in his eyes. You're worried. Every damn day. Me too. I know. They sat in silence, shoulders touching, watching the light fade. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled. The sound made Iris shiver. Caleb? Yeah? What if I'm a bad mother? He turned to look at her. Why would you think that? Because I don't know what I'm doing. I never had a good example. My mother... She stopped, swallowed hard. She wasn't kind. And I don't know if I know how to be different. Caleb took her hand, squeezed it. You're already different. You work hard. You don't quit. You care about things. That's more than a lot of people have. That doesn't make me a good mother. No, but it's a start, and you'll figure out the rest as you go. What if I don't? Then I'll help you. That's what marriage is. Iris leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him. I'm glad I said yes that night. Me too. December hit with brutal cold, the kind that turned your breath to ice and made your bones ache. They moved through the days in a rhythm born of necessity. Feed the animals, haul water, keep the fire going, sleep, repeat. The world shrank to just the ranch, the cabin, the two of them. Iris was big now, not just pregnant, but truly heavy, her belly swollen tight, her movements slow and careful. She spent most of her time inside, cooking, mending, keeping the cabin warm. Caleb rarely left her side for long. One night, a blizzard rolled in without warning. The wind howled like something alive, shaking the cabin walls, driving snow through every crack. Caleb stuffed rags in the gaps, piled more wood on the fire, then came to sit beside Iris on the bed. Storm's bad, he said. I can hear it. Might last a few days. We have enough supplies? Should, long as nothing goes wrong. Iris looked at him. Why do you sound worried? Because storms like this, things happen. Animals get spooked, roofs collapse, people get hurt. We'll be fine. Yeah, we will. But he didn't sound convinced. And as the night wore on, Iris understood why. The wind grew stronger, the cold deeper. Even with the fire roaring, the temperature inside dropped. Frost formed on the walls, their breath misted in the air. Caleb stayed up, feeding the fire constantly, checking the door and windows. Iris tried to sleep but couldn't. Her back hurt. The baby was moving, restless and insistent. She shifted positions a dozen times, nothing helping. You all right? Caleb asked, looking over. Can't get comfortable. Want me to help? How? He came to the bed, positioned himself behind her, his hands on her lower back, started rubbing slow circles, applying pressure. Iris let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Better? Yeah, don't stop. He didn't, just kept working the tight muscles, his hands warm and steady. Gradually, Iris felt herself relax. The pain didn't disappear, but it dulled to something manageable.
Thank you, she said quietly. Any time. She turned her head to look at him. I mean it, for everything, for not giving up on me. I never even considered it. Why not? You could have sent me back to town after the first week. Nobody would have blamed you. Caleb was quiet for a moment. You remember what I said that first night about you still standing? Yeah, that's why. Because you didn't quit. You took every hard thing this place threw at you and kept going. That's not something you give up on. Iris felt tears prick her eyes. Damn pregnancy hormones. I'm not that strong. Yeah, you are. You just don't see it yet. She turned in his arms, awkward with her belly between them, and kissed him. It was slow, tender, nothing like their usual quick, functional touches. When they pulled apart, Caleb rested his forehead against hers. I love you, he said quietly. Iris's breath caught. He'd never said that before. Neither had she. It hung in the air between them, huge and terrifying and real. You don't have to say it back, Caleb added quickly. I just needed you to know. Iris stopped, because the words were right there, on the tip of her tongue, but saying them felt like jumping off a cliff. I care about you. A lot. I know. It's just hard for me to... I know. He pulled her close, careful of her belly, and held her while the storm raged outside. Iris closed her eyes, feeling the steady beat of his heart, and thought maybe love wasn't about the words. Maybe it was about this, the holding, the choosing, the showing up day after day. Maybe she loved him too. She just wasn't ready to say it yet. The storm broke on the third day. They woke to silence, that particular quiet that meant the wind had died and the world was buried. Caleb went outside first, digging a path through snow that came up past his waist. Iris watched from the window, her hand on her belly, feeling the baby shift and kick. When Caleb finally made it to the barn, she held her breath, counted the minutes. 15, 20, 25. The door opened. Caleb came back in, covered in snow, his face grim. What happened? Lost the old mule, found him dead in his stall. Iris's heart sank. I'm sorry. Not your fault. He was old. The cold just... Caleb shook his head. Everything else is fine, but we're going to need to dig out for days. They did. The work was brutal, numbing, endless. Dig a path to the barn, dig out the chicken coop, dig out the well, clear the roof before the weight of snow brought it down. Every muscle Iris had ached, and she could do almost nothing to help. But she did what she could, kept the fire going, kept food ready, made sure Caleb ate and rested even when he didn't want to. Small things, but they mattered. One evening, about a week after the storm, Margaret appeared out of nowhere. She rode up on a sturdy bay, snow to the horse's chest, looking windburned and determined. Figured you two might need checking on, she called. Caleb helped her dismount. You rode through that? Course I did. Storm this bad, people check on each other. That's how we survive. She came inside, stamped snow off her boots, and immediately went to Iris. Looked her over with a critical eye. When are you due? Late January, we think. You think? I wasn't exactly keeping a calendar when this happened. Margaret snorted. Fair enough. You feeling all right? Tired, sore, huge. That's normal. Any bleeding, cramping? No. Good. Baby moving? All the time. Even better. Margaret turned to Caleb. You got supplies for the birth? Clean linens, hot water, sharp knife? Caleb nodded. I've been preparing. Preparing's different from ready. When the time comes, you send word. I'll be here. In another blizzard? Especially in a blizzard. That's when these things always happen. She stayed for an hour, drinking coffee and sharing news from the valley. A family to the east had lost their barn. Another ranch had a chimney fire but managed to save the house. Small tragedies and small victories, the kind that made up frontier life. When she left, Iris felt steadier, like having Margaret know made it real. Someone else was invested now, someone who knew what to expect. It helped. That night, lying in bed, Iris finally said the words. I love you. Caleb went still. What? I love you.
I should have said it before, but I was scared. But I do. I love you. Caleb rolled over, pulled her close. Say it again. I love you. Again. I love you, you stubborn man. He kissed her then, deep and slow, and Iris felt something unlock in her chest, something that had been held tight for too long. I love you too, he said against her mouth, in case that wasn't clear. It was clear. They fell asleep tangled together, the baby kicking between them, the fire burning low. January came in cold and clear. Iris was enormous now, waddling more than walking, her back constantly aching. The baby had dropped lower, pressing on everything uncomfortable. She couldn't sleep for more than an hour at a time. Couldn't eat much. Couldn't do much of anything except wait. Caleb was a wreck. He tried to hide it, but she could see it in the way he hovered, the way he checked on her every hour, the way he jumped at every small noise. You need to calm down, she told him one morning. I am calm. Your wound tighter than a watch spring. You're making me nervous. I'm fine. You're not fine. You're terrified. Caleb sat down at the table, rubbed his face. Yeah, I am. Talk to me. Thinking about last time, about Ellen, about everything that went wrong. Iris lowered herself into the chair across from him. I'm not Ellen. I know. And this isn't then. I know that too. But knowing doesn't stop the fear. No. But you can't let it paralyze you. When the time comes, I'm going to need you present, not trapped in the past. Caleb looked at her, his eyes red-rimmed. What if I can't do it? You can, because you're the strongest person I know, and because I need you to be. He reached across the table, took her hand. I'm sorry. For what? For making this about me. This is your body, your pain. I should be supporting you, not falling apart. You're supporting me, just by being here. Doesn't feel like enough. It is. The baby kicked hard, visible through Iris's dress. Caleb's eyes went to her belly, something softening in his face. Does that hurt? Sometimes. Mostly it's just weird. Can I? He gestured hesitantly. Yeah. He came around the table, knelt beside her chair, put his hand on her belly. The baby kicked again, right against his palm. Caleb's face split into a grin. Strong, he said. Tell me about it. Feels like there's a mule in there. Good. Strong is good. They stayed like that for a long moment, Caleb's hand on her belly, Iris's hand on his shoulder. A moment of peace before the storm. But labor started 3 days later. It was early morning, still dark, when Iris woke to a sharp pain low in her belly. Different from the aches she'd been feeling, sharper, more insistent. She lay still, waiting to see if it would come again. It did. 10 minutes later, then again. Caleb? He was awake immediately. What's wrong? I think it's time. He was out of bed before she finished the sentence, pulling on clothes, lighting lamps, moving with frantic purpose. I need to get Margaret. Not yet. The pains are still far apart. I don't care. I'm getting her now. Caleb, I'm not taking chances. He was out the door before she could argue. Iris heard the barn door slam, heard the horse's hooves pounding away into the darkness. She was alone. Another contraction hit, stronger this time. She breathed through it, counting the seconds. It lasted maybe 30 seconds. Not long, but intense. When it passed, she got up, started moving around the cabin, made sure there was water heating, pulled out the linens they'd prepared, tried to stay calm. The contractions came steadily, gradually getting closer together. 15 minutes. 12. 10. Caleb burst back through the door, maybe an hour later, Margaret right behind him. How close? Margaret asked, already pulling off her coat. 10 minutes. First baby? Yes. Then we've got time, don't worry. She turned to Caleb. You? Out. What? Out. I need to examine her and you're going to be in the way. I'm not leaving. You will if I say so. They stared at each other. Finally, Iris spoke up. Caleb, please, just for a minute. He looked like he wanted to argue, but he went outside. Margaret turned to Iris with a grim smile. Men. Useless during childbirth. Now let's see what we're working with. The next hours blurred together. Pain came in waves, each one stronger than the last. Margaret stayed calm, coaching Iris through breathing, telling her when to push and when to rest. Caleb paced outside, occasionally sticking his head in and getting shooed away. Afternoon faded to evening, evening to night. The contractions came faster, harder, until there was barely time to breathe between them. "I can't," Iris gasped at one point. "I can't do this." "Yes, you can," Margaret said firmly. "You're almost there." "I can't. You don't have a choice. That baby's coming whether you're ready or not. So you're going to push when I tell you to push, and you're going to get through this." Another contraction hit. Iris screamed, bore down, felt something shift. "That's it," Margaret said. "Again, come on." Iris pushed until she thought she'd split in half, pushed until she had nothing left. And then suddenly, shockingly, there was a baby. Crying. Loud and indignant and alive. Margaret worked quickly, cutting the cord, wiping the baby down. "It's a girl." Iris's vision swam. "She's all right?" "She's perfect." Margaret wrapped the baby in a clean cloth, placed her on Iris's chest. Iris looked down at the tiny, red, furious face and felt something crack open inside her. Something huge and terrifying and absolutely worth it. "Caleb," she called weakly. The door flew open. Caleb stood there, his face pale, his eyes wide. "Come here," Iris said. He approached slowly, like he was afraid he'd break something, looked down at the baby, and Iris watched his face transform, saw the fear drain away, replaced by wonder. "She's beautiful," he whispered. "She's wrinkled and red and looks like an angry potato." "She's beautiful," he repeated firmly. Iris laughed, exhausted and elated and more tired than she'd ever been in her life. "Help me out. What are we calling her?" Caleb looked at her, then at the baby. "What do you want to call her?" "I don't know. Rose feels wrong now." "Why?" "Because she's not Ellen's daughter. She's ours." Caleb's throat worked. "Yeah, she is. So what do we call her?" He thought for a moment. "Grace, because she's a gift we didn't earn." Iris looked down at the baby, at Grace, and nodded. "Grace, I like that." Margaret finished cleaning up, her movements efficient. "I'll stay tonight. Make sure everything's all right. You need rest." "Thank you," Iris said. "For everything." "Don't thank me yet. Wait until you haven't slept in 3 months." But she was smiling. The first weeks were brutal. Grace cried constantly, wanted to eat every 2 hours, barely slept. Iris was exhausted beyond reason, stumbling through the days in a fog of sleeplessness and pain and hormones. Caleb helped where he could, changed diapers, rocked the baby when Iris needed a break, took over all the ranch work. But there was only so much he could do. One night, maybe 3 weeks in, Iris sat in the rocking chair with Grace screaming in her arms, tears streaming down her own face. "I don't know what you want," she said desperately. "I fed you. I changed you. I'm doing everything I know how to do." Grace just screamed louder. Caleb came in from checking the barn, took one look at them and crossed the room. Took Grace gently from Iris's arms. "Go to bed." "I can't just go to bed. I'll handle her." "But..." "Iris, you're exhausted. You need sleep. I've got this." She wanted to argue, but she was so tired she could barely see straight. She stumbled to the bed, collapsed fully dressed, and was asleep in seconds. When she woke, pale morning light was filtering through the window. She sat up in a panic. Caleb was in the rocking chair, Grace asleep on his chest, both of them breathing softly. He looked up when she moved. "Morning. How long was I out?" 6 hours. "Why didn't you wake me?" "Because you needed rest," and she finally settled down around midnight. Iris felt tears well up again. "I'm a terrible mother." "No, you're not." "I couldn't even get her to stop crying." "Nobody can all the time. Babies cry. It's what they do." "I just feel so useless." Caleb stood carefully, brought Grace over, transferred her to Iris's arms. "You're not useless. You're learning. We both are." Grace stirred, made a small noise, but didn't wake. Iris looked down at her daughter's tiny face, still red, still wrinkled, but somehow more human now, more real. I do love her, she said quietly, even when I want to run away. I know. Do you ever want to run away? Caleb smiled. Every damn day. But then I look at you two and I remember why I don't. Iris leaned her head on his shoulder. We're really doing this. Yeah, we really are. And somehow, impossibly, they were. The days turned into weeks, the weeks into months. And Grace grew. Not smoothly. Not without setbacks or scares or nights when Iris was certain she was doing everything wrong. But Grace grew anyway, from a screaming red thing into a baby who could hold her head up, who smiled at Caleb when he came in from the fields, who grabbed Iris's finger with surprising strength. Spring came again, different this time. Not just the end of hardship, but the beginning of something new. Iris worked the garden with Grace, strapped to her back in a sling Margaret had shown her how to make. Caleb built a small fence around the vegetable patch to keep out the deer, worked the fields, expanded the herd. They were building something, not just surviving anymore, actually building. One afternoon in late April, Iris was hanging laundry when she heard riders approaching. Her stomach tightened, still did, every time. But it was just Margaret and Sarah, both of them grinning. Heard you needed help with planting, Margaret called. Iris laughed, relieved and grateful. I didn't ask for help. Don't need to ask, that's what neighbors do. They spent the day working side by side, Sarah entertaining Grace while the women got the seeds in the ground. It was good, honest work, the kind that made you tired in a satisfying way. That evening, as Margaret was getting ready to leave, she pulled Iris aside. You're doing good here, she said. Better than I expected. What did you expect? Honestly, I thought you'd be gone by spring. Most people can't handle the isolation, can't handle the work. But you stuck. Didn't have much choice. There's always a choice. You chose to stay. That matters. After they left, Caleb came to find Iris on the porch. Grace was asleep in the cradle Caleb had moved outside so they could watch the sunset. You look happy, he said. Iris considered it. I am. Is that strange? Why would that be strange? Because a year ago I was half frozen, starving, and desperate. And now I'm... She gestured around. I'm happy. Caleb sat beside her, took her hand. You deserve to be happy. So do you. I am. They sat in silence, watching the light fade, Grace's soft breathing the only sound. Somewhere out in the valley, a coyote called. Another answered, the ancient conversation of wild things. Caleb? Yeah? Thank you for asking me that night. In the saloon, he smiled. Thank you for saying yes. Summer brought more growth. The crops came in strong, corn and beans and squash, more than they could eat, enough to sell in town. The cattle thrived, the chickens laid eggs by the dozen, and Caleb talked about buying pigs in the fall. Grace learned to sit up on her own, then to crawl. She was fast, too, could cross a room in seconds if something caught her attention. Keeping her out of trouble became a full-time job. She's going to be a handful, Margaret said one day, watching Grace try to eat dirt from a potted plant. She already is, Iris said, swooping in to stop her. Wait until she starts walking, then you're really in trouble. Grace started walking in August, just before her first birthday. One day she was crawling, the next she pulled herself up on the table leg and took 3 wobbling steps before falling on her bottom. Caleb happened to be coming in from the barn and saw the whole thing. His face lit up like Christmas. Did you see that? I saw. She walked. She fell. But she walked first. Iris couldn't help but smile at his excitement. Yeah, she did. They threw a small party for Grace's birthday, just them and Margaret's family. Sarah had made a rag doll, which Grace immediately tried to eat. Margaret brought a cake, slightly lopsided but sweet. They sang, and Grace clapped her hands, delighted by the attention. That night, after everyone had gone home and Grace was asleep, Iris and Caleb sat outside watching the stars. Can you believe it's been a year? Iris asked. No, feels like yesterday and a lifetime ago at the same time. I know what you mean. Caleb was quiet for a moment. I never thought I'd get this again. A family. A reason to keep going. You would have kept going anyway. Maybe. But it would have been different. Emptier. Iris leaned her head on his shoulder. I'm glad I'm here. Me too. They stayed there until the cold drove them inside, two people who'd started as strangers, who'd gambled on each other in a snowstorm, who'd built something real from nothing but determination and hope.
The
second winter was easier than the first. Not easy. Winter was never easy. But they knew what to expect now. Had systems in place. Had enough food stored, enough firewood stacked, enough experience to not panic when the storms hit. Grace was walking everywhere now, talking in her own language that made sense only to her. She followed Caleb around like a shadow when he worked near the cabin, tottering after him on unsteady legs, calling "da-da" in varying degrees of urgency. It melted him every time. "She's got you wrapped around her finger," Iris said one morning, watching Caleb slow his pace so Grace could keep up. "I don't know what you're talking about." "You gave her 3 extra pieces of bacon at breakfast." "She was hungry." "She played you." Caleb grinned. "Yeah, probably." In February, Iris realized she was pregnant again. She didn't tell Caleb right away. Wanted to be sure. Wanted to get past the first dangerous months before she said anything. But he figured it out anyway. "You're pregnant," he said one morning, watching her push her eggs around her plate. Iris looked up, startled. "How did you stopped drinking coffee. You're tired all the time. And you've been sick 3 mornings this week." "I thought I was being subtle." "You were, but I know you." Iris set down her fork. "Are you upset?" "Why would I be upset?" "Because it's soon. Grace isn't even 2 yet." Caleb came around the table, pulled her up into his arms. "I'm not upset. I'm happy. Scared, but happy." "Me too. We'll figure it out, just like we did with Grace." That didn't exactly go smoothly. No, but we got through it. And we'll get through this too. This pregnancy was different from the first. Easier in some ways. Iris knew what to expect, didn't panic at every twinge. Harder in others. She was chasing after a toddler while growing another person, which left her exhausted in ways she hadn't imagined. But they managed. Caleb took over more with Grace, playing with her in the evenings so Iris could rest. Margaret visited more often, bringing food and helping with the household work. "You're building a dynasty here," Margaret joked one day, watching Grace play while Iris's belly grew. "Or a small army." "Same thing on a ranch." The baby came in October 2 weeks early, a boy this time, arriving fast and furious in the middle of the night. Margaret barely made it in time. They named him Samuel, after Caleb's father, Sam for short. Grace was fascinated by her baby brother, wanted to touch him constantly, to hold him, to show him her toys. Iris had to watch her carefully to make sure her enthusiasm didn't accidentally smother him. "Gentle," Iris said for the 100th time. "Be gentle with your brother." "Baby," Grace said solemnly, patting Sam's head with surprising tenderness. "That's right, baby." Caleb watched them with an expression Iris couldn't quite read, something between joy and terror and overwhelming gratitude. "You all right?" she asked. "Yeah, just—" He shook his head. "I keep thinking about where we started, where I was 2 years ago. Alone in this cabin, half dead inside, convinced my life was over. And now you have 2 kids and no sleep." He laughed. "Yeah, and I wouldn't trade it for anything." But the years rolled on, marked not by dates, but by milestones. Grace's 3rd birthday. Sam learning to walk. Grace starting to help with small chores, her face serious with concentration as she collected eggs. Sam following his sister everywhere, copying everything she did. The ranch prospered. Caleb bought more cattle, built a bigger barn, hired a hand to help with the heavy work. A young man named Tom, quiet and hardworking, who lived in a small cabin near the creek. Iris planted fruit trees, apple, pear, cherry. They wouldn't bear for years, but that was the point. They were thinking long-term now, building something that would last. One spring afternoon when Grace was 5 and Sam was 3, Iris was in the garden when a rider approached. Her first instinct was still caution, probably always would be, but she recognized the horse. The rider dismounted, and Iris felt her stomach drop. It was Clayton, older, harder looking than she remembered, but unmistakably him, the man she'd stabbed, the man she'd run from, the man who'd haunted her nightmares for years. He walked up to the fence, stopped a respectful distance away. "Hello, Iris." Her throat went dry. "What do you want?" "Just to talk." We have nothing to talk about. I think we do. Caleb appeared from the barn, moving fast. He put himself between Iris and Clayton without a word. You need to leave, Caleb said flatly. Clayton held up his hands. I'm not here for trouble. Don't care, leave anyway. Caleb, wait, Iris said, though her voice shook. Let him say what he came to say. Iris, it's all right. I need to hear this. Caleb didn't move, but he didn't throw Clayton off the property either, just stood there, tense as wire. Clayton looked at Iris. I came to apologize. What? For what I did. For how I treated you. I was a different person back then. Angry, drunk most of the time, convinced the world owed me something. He rubbed his side absently where she'd stabbed him. You almost killed me that night. Spent 2 weeks in bed, another month barely able to walk. Had a lot of time to think. Iris's hands were shaking. So you came here to what? Make me feel guilty? No. I came here to tell you I'm sorry, and to tell you I'm not that man anymore. I got sober, got work, tried to make something of myself. But I couldn't move forward without making this right. It'll never be right. I know, but I had to try. Iris looked at him, really looked, saw the truth of what he was saying in the lines of his face, the steadiness in his eyes. He was different, changed in a way that felt real. I'm not going to forgive you, she said quietly. I can't. I understand. But I appreciate you coming. That took courage. Clayton nodded. I won't bother you again. Just needed you to know that what happened, that was on me. Not you. You didn't deserve any of it. No, I didn't. He turned to leave, then paused, looked back. You've got a good thing here. A good man. Don't let the past ruin it. I won't. He mounted his horse, tipped his hat, and rode away. Iris stood watching until he disappeared over the ridge. Caleb's arm came around her shoulders. You all right? Yeah, I think I am. You want me to go after him? Make sure he's really gone? No, he meant what he said. I could tell. How do you feel? Iris thought about it. Lighter? Like I've been carrying something heavy and didn't realize it until I set it down. Caleb pulled her close. Good. You deserve to feel light. They stood there for a long moment, Grace and Sam playing nearby, the sun warm on their faces. The past had come calling, and it had left without taking anything. That felt like victory. Grace turned 8, then 9, then 10. Sam grew tall and gangly, all elbows and knees. They were good kids, not perfect, but good. They fought like siblings, loved like siblings, worked the ranch like they'd been born to it. Iris taught them both to read and write, using an old primer Margaret had given her. Grace took to it naturally, always had her nose in a book when she should have been doing chores. Sam was slower, more interested in working with his hands, but he tried. The ranch became known in the valley, the Rourke place, where the cattle were healthy and the crops came in strong. People came to Caleb for advice, to Iris for remedies and preserves. They built a reputation for fairness, hard work, and the kind of stubborn resilience that defined frontier life. One evening in late summer when Grace was 12 and Sam was 10, they sat down to dinner, all of them together, something that was harder now that the kids were older and the work was endless. I heard something in town today, Caleb said. What? Iris asked, passing the potatoes. Railroad's coming through, going to run through the valley, probably 5 miles south of here. Grace looked up. What does that mean? Means things are going to change. More people, more opportunity, but also more noise, more trouble. Is that good or bad? Sam asked. Both. Depends on how we handle it. Iris set down her fork. What are you thinking? I'm thinking we need to decide what we want. We could expand, sell cattle to the railroad camps, make real money. Or we could stay small, keep things the way they are. What do you want to do? Caleb looked around the table, at Iris, at the kids, at the life they'd built. I want to ask all of you. This is your home too. Grace spoke first. I think we should expand. We've worked hard for this. We should make the most of it. Sam nodded. I agree. We can handle it. Iris looked at Caleb. What about you? What does your gut say? My gut says we can do this. Together. Then we do it. They shook on it, All four of them, hands stacked in the middle of the table. A family decision, the first of many. The expansion wasn't easy. They bought more land, hired more hands, built a second barn. Caleb was gone more, dealing with buyers and suppliers. Iris took over more of the ranch management, discovering she had a head for numbers and negotiation. Grace turned out to have a gift with horses. Could gentle the wildest colt, had an instinct for what an animal needed. By 14, she was training horses for neighbors, earning her own money. Sam was different, quieter, more thoughtful. He liked fixing things, rebuilding a broken fence, repairing a wagon wheel. Caleb started teaching him carpentry, and he took to it like he'd been waiting his whole life to find it. They weren't perfect. They fought, made mistakes, had bad seasons and good. But they kept going, because that's what they'd learned. That's what Caleb and Iris had taught them, not through words, but through action. You keep going, you do the work, you don't quit. Years passed in the way they do when you're busy living, fast and slow at the same time. Grace grew into a young woman, capable and confident. She married a rancher's son from the next valley over, a good man named Daniel, who treated her like she hung the moon. They built a house on the south section of the Rourke land, started their own small operation. Sam stayed longer. He wasn't interested in ranching, not really, but he loved the building. Eventually, he opened a carpentry shop in Red Hollow, which had grown into a proper town now that the railroad had come through. He'd come home on Sundays, always, for dinner with his parents. Caleb's hair went gray, then white. His hands got stiffer, his back more bent. But he still worked every day, still woke before dawn, still knew every inch of the ranch like it was written on his skin. Iris aged too, though she liked to think she wore it better. Her hair streaked silver, her hands marked with decades of work. But she was still strong, still capable, still the person Caleb reached for in the dark. One evening, when they were both in their 60s, they sat on the porch watching the sunset. The same porch where they'd sat so many times before, through crisis and calm, through every season of their life together. "You ever regret it?" Caleb asked. "Regret what?" "Saying yes that night, marrying a stranger in a blizzard." Iris looked at him, really looked, at the man he'd become, the life they'd built, everything they'd survived together. "Not once," she said, "not even in the beginning, when it was hard. Especially not then. The hard parts made the rest worth it." Caleb took her hand, his grip still strong despite the arthritis. "I'm glad you were desperate that night," Iris laughed. "That's a terrible thing to say, but true. If you hadn't been desperate, you wouldn't have come here, and I'd have died alone in this cabin, bitter and broken." "You weren't broken, just hurt." "Same thing, sometimes." "Maybe, but you healed anyway." "Because of you." "Because of us," Iris corrected. "We healed each other." They sat in silence as the light faded, the way they'd sat 1,000 times before. Grace's house showed lights in the distance. Sam would be closing his shop in town about now. The cattle were settled, the horses fed, the chickens roosting, everything in its place. "You know what I think?" Iris said. "What?" "I think we beat it. The loneliness, the fear, the idea that we couldn't make it work. We took the worst possible start and turned it into something real." "We did, didn't we?" "Yeah, we really did." Caleb smiled, that same crooked smile that had caught her off guard years ago. Not bad for a couple of desperate strangers. Not bad at all. Well, the winters got harder as they got older. Not the weather, though that was still brutal. But their bodies protested the cold more. The work took longer. Recovery time stretched. Caleb finally agreed to hire a foreman, a young man named Jack who reminded Iris of Caleb at that age. Serious, hardworking, quiet. Grace and Daniel took over more of the daily operations. Sam came home more often, fixing things that needed fixing, making sure his parents didn't push themselves too hard. "You raised good kids," Margaret said one afternoon. She was in her 80s now, still sharp but slower. They sat in Iris's kitchen drinking tea, the way they'd done for decades. "We got lucky." "Luck had nothing to do with it. You taught them right, taught them to work, to care, to stick when things got hard." Caleb did most of that. "You both did. Don't sell yourself short." Iris looked out the window at the ranch, at everything they'd built. "I never thought I'd have this." "What?" "A home, a family, a reason to wake up in the morning." When I walked into that saloon 25 years ago, I was sure I was going to die. But you didn't. No, I didn't. You know why? Why? Margaret leaned forward. Because you were willing to take a chance on yourself. Most people aren't. They're too scared, too proud, too stuck in their ways. But you saw an opportunity and you grabbed it with both hands. I was desperate. Desperation and courage look the same sometimes. The difference is what you do with it. Caleb got sick in the spring. Nothing dramatic, just a cough that wouldn't go away, a tiredness that went bone deep. The doctor came out, examined him, and pulled Iris aside. His heart's weak, has been for a while, I'd guess. He needs rest. He won't rest. Then he needs to at least slow down. Iris tried, but Caleb was stubborn, always had been. He'd slow down for a few days, then she'd find him out in the barn or the fields, working like nothing was wrong. You're going to kill yourself, she told him one morning. Everybody dies of something. That doesn't mean you should help it along. I'm not helping it along, I'm just living. There's a difference between living and being stupid. Caleb smiled. Is there? Caleb? Iris. He took her hands. I know what you're trying to do, and I appreciate it. But I'm not going to spend whatever time I have left sitting in a chair watching the world go by. I'd rather die working than live like that. Even if it means less time? Even then. Iris wanted to argue, wanted to rage at him, at fate, at the unfairness of finally having everything only to lose it. But she understood, had always understood. This ranch, this work, it wasn't just what Caleb did, it was who he was. Fine, she said, but you're taking breaks, and if you collapse in a field somewhere, I'm going to be furious. Noted. He lasted another 2 years. Good years mostly. He got to see Grace's first baby, a girl they named Iris. Got to finish the barn he'd been planning for a decade. Got to sit on the porch with his wife and his children and his grandchildren, surrounded by everything he'd built. He died on a Tuesday in March, sitting in his chair by the fire. Iris found him when she came back from the chicken coop. He looked peaceful, like he'd just fallen asleep. She sat beside him for a long time, holding his hand, saying goodbye to the man who'd saved her life by offering her a chance at his. The funeral was small, just family, a few close friends, the people who'd known Caleb and understood what he meant. They buried him on a hill overlooking the valley, where he could see the ranch he'd built, the land he'd worked, the life he'd created. Iris stood at the grave after everyone had left, looking down at the fresh earth. You better be proud of yourself, she said quietly, because I am. Proud of what we built. Proud of who you were. Proud that I was brave enough to say yes when you asked. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of spring grass and distant rain. Iris closed her eyes, feeling it wash over her. I'll see you later, she said. But not yet. I've still got work to do. She walked back down the hill, back to the ranch, back to the life that was hers now. Alone, but not lonely. Never lonely. Not with Grace and Daniel, with Sam and his new wife, with grandchildren running around, with the land and the animals and the rhythm of work that had defined her life for 25 years. She kept going. Because that's what you did. That's what they'd taught her. Iris lived another 15 years, long enough to see 3 more grandchildren born, long enough to see the ranch thrive under Grace's management, long enough to watch the valley change, grow, modernize in ways that would have seemed impossible when she first arrived, long enough to become the story people told. The woman who'd walked into a saloon in a blizzard with nothing, who'd married a stranger and built an empire, who'd proven that sometimes the craziest decisions are the right ones. She died in her sleep, at 82, in the cabin she'd first entered as a desperate stranger. Grace found her in the morning, looking peaceful, one hand stretched across the empty side of the bed where Caleb used to sleep. They buried her next to him, on the hill overlooking the valley. At the funeral, Sam spoke. My parents taught us a lot of things, he said. How to work, how to survive, how to build something that lasts. But the most important thing they taught us was this. It doesn't matter where you start. It matters what you do with where you end up. He looked out at the assembled family, children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren. All of them here because 2 desperate people had taken a chance on each other in a snowstorm. They started with nothing, Sam continued. No money, No plan, barely knew each other's names. But they had courage, and they had each other, and somehow that was enough. He paused, his voice catching. That's their legacy. Not the ranch, not the land. The lesson that courage and commitment can turn nothing into everything. That the wildest gambles sometimes pay off. That love doesn't have to start with passion. Sometimes it starts with a choice, made over and over, day after day, until one morning you wake up and realize it's real. After the service, Grace stood at the graves with her own children gathered around her. Tell us the story again, her youngest daughter asked. About how Grandma and Grandpa met. Grace smiled. All right, but it's a long one. We don't care. Fine. It started with a storm, and she told the story the way it had been told to her, about desperation and courage, about a question asked in a saloon and an answer given in the snow, about two people who shouldn't have worked but did anyway, about how sometimes, when you're at the end of your rope and the world's given you no good options, the craziest choice is the right one, about how the best things in life come from taking chances on people, on possibilities, on futures you can't see but choose to believe in anyway. Because here's what Iris and Caleb understood. Even if they couldn't have explained it that first night, survival isn't about having all the answers. It's about being willing to figure them out as you go. Love isn't about finding someone perfect. It's about finding someone willing to work through imperfect with you. And legacy isn't about what you leave behind in land or money or possessions. It's about what you prove is possible. What you show the people who come after you can be done, even when it seems impossible. Iris Vale walked into a saloon with nothing and walked out with a chance. She took it. And she spent the rest of her life proving that chances, when met with courage and commitment, can become everything. That's not a fairy tale. That's just the truth about what happens when two people decide that giving up isn't an option. When they choose each other, day after day, through every storm and every season. When they build something real from nothing but will and work and the stubborn refusal to quit. The ranch still stands. 5 generations have worked it now. And on the hill overlooking the valley, 2 stones mark 2 graves side by side. The inscriptions are simple. Caleb Rourke. He took a chance. Iris Rourke. She said yes. Sometimes that's all it takes.